I thought we would do is, some of the questions that have been asked of me at other presentations are, what is this? What are we doing? So I just took a general who, what, when, where, why. The why is not up there because I think you know a lot of the reasons why. But when you're doing a presentation, most of you who are here are probably interested in a professional presentation. You're not interested in class presentations. So I'm skipping over and I'm going, even though we would have, could you give me just 1 minute?
Sure.
I have a few posters. When I looked through and was reading all the things that they tell students about posters, one of the key things about posters that I did not see mentioned, and as an educator I want to bring to your attention, is that a poster is a different way of learning for some people. And it's a different way of, when you teach something to somebody, you learn. And when you are doing your own poster for a presentation to others, it's a different way of you learning. So one way of handling presentations of information that you either want to get across or you're trying to share with other people is through lectures, and that is one way of learning and it's one way of teaching. Posters is another way of learning and it's another way of teaching. One of the big shifts that happened in education that I believe had a great influence on this was a gentleman by the name of Howard Gardner. How many of you have heard of multiple intelligences? He's a professor from Harvard, and he came up with the idea that people learn, that we have multiple ways of learning, and that some people, we can't be intelligent in all of these ways. And he came up with the 7 intelligences. I think it's now up to 11. I always thought, I don't want to be limited by those. I don't fit into any of them. where have I been? But one of them, the 2 that he says we always are tested on and we're always taught with, were logic, which would be math. And this is a way we know, you can tell first graders will say, oh, he's really smart, because he's really good in math, and he's really good in reading. So literacy and logic, which would be mathematics, are 2 ways that we've used to measure people's intelligence. And he came up with this idea that said, what about people like Martha Graham, who had this artistic genius? What about Freud, who had this knowledge of others? What about Mahatma Gandhi, who had knowledge of self? What about, and he said there are different ways in which people can be extremely intelligent, and we need to be able to develop those intelligences in people. So when we began to take this theory seriously, I think, we began to change the way we did things in education. And he is in the Harvard School of Education, I think. Anyway, 2 of his books that I highly recommend for you to be thinking about if you're going into librarianship are Creating Minds, in which he gives examples through these lives of the people I just talked to you about. In music he used Stravinsky. In art he used Picasso and Freud, Mahatma Gandhi, Martha Graham, and of course Einstein. And T.S. Eliot, The Wastelands. He goes into the lives of these people and how their genius was created. And the other one is Multiple Intelligences by Howard Gardner. And he wrote in about probably the late 80s was when he started his ideas. And he's written many, many articles. But it has greatly influenced the way that we teach and the way that we presentations prior to, more recently I should say, presentations like poster presentations are common throughout all of professional organizations. It's a way presenting information. That's different from papers. So what is a poster? It's this visual display of information that you are going to be presenting to people. Now, you're doing a symposium. And in your symposium, how many of you are doing a poster?
No one signed up to do a poster.
No one signed up to do a poster. Oh, okay. Well, most of my, all right. Well, most of this talk is about posters, so I will try to go through it very quickly, and then we will talk about paper presentations at the end. Anyway, I'll try to go through it quickly. What you want to do in a poster presentation is be very organized and to present the information in a way that will be attractive and that will be captured by the screens. Oh, I know what I have to do. I have to do the slideshow. I'm sorry. Okay. So this is the type of thing that you would have. This takes a great deal of effort. It takes a lot of thinking because you're not putting the words down, your introduction, your first heading, your second heading. You're putting down the information in a graphic form. How many of you have seen this type of thing before? Okay. All right, so this is one type of, you can see here in this area on the right-hand side is the abstract. And at the very bottom, in the middle, is conclusion. The difference is that this, whoops. I already got ahead of myself here. Okay, this, and I just told you all the different reasons for it, and it's interactive. Or this. This is where your person is at the front of the room talking. There are two philosophical differences in these two types of presentations. This and this. And it has to do with the audience. This and this. Okay, what did you see?
Engaged.
More engagement. There's some engagement with the speaker. Okay, so you have some information and you're engaging your audience. So if we just skip the rest of this and went right into your talk presentation, which is going to be this, and you do not want this, then these are some of the things that you're going to need to do. First, and I'm sorry I don't have these in part of the toolkit. I don't know why I was thinking that our talk tonight was on posters. I'm sorry, poster presentation. But anyway, I'll make it up to you. I will get this changed for you. I don't think you want to keep this one forever. No, it's okay. Anyway, but what you want to do is, if you're presenting a paper, people do not listen in the same way that they read. So if you're reading a paper and you've got your introduction, you've got the heading there to look back at, and you've got your headings throughout your paper that you can cue yourself in to what your paper is about. And as good readers, which probably most of us are, you kind of skim your article first. Or if you're in a real hurry, a professor hands you a reading that you're supposed to do. You get that article, you already know what that is about before you really read a paragraph. How have you managed to know about what a paper is about before you've even read a paragraph? What are some things that you've done? And I just named a couple.
You know the context that you got it in.
Well, the context.
The professor gave it to you in a class, you know.
If he gave it to you in research methods, you know this is going to be about a study, probably. Okay. If he gave it to you in ethics, you know it's either going to be philosophy or it's going to be about what you you should or should not be doing. And we're in library field, so it's probably going to have something to do with librarianship. What other things do you do? Generally, you get a piece of paper and
Scan a title, scan the abstract, look at the first paragraph,
Yeah.
look at the last paragraph, look for tables.
okay. And who wrote it? Like, if you got an article, which you would, but by Bill Gates, you would already have a context within which to put your mind around it. And as you're reading it, you would be able to go back to your introduction, and sometimes you can skip this part because you're really not interested, and you go over here, and that's the part you're really interested in. And then that's one you underline, and that's the one that they said was going to be on the exam. You don't really care about reference, but they said, be sure to know something about that. Okay. When you're giving a paper, you don't have any of that. The person is sitting there waiting for you to talk, to tell them, like this young man, to tell them, give them some information. So in order to help them, remember, just keep your mind on the fact that they're not reading the paper, you're reading the paper, or presenting the paper. And there are two ways to do it. One is to read the paper, and the other is to present the paper. And they are two different things. So we'll talk about reading the paper first. People cannot just sit and listen to you read text. No eye contact, no gestures, no emotion, because they will be like this guy. It's just really hard and tedious to follow somebody reading a text. Even when you're reading a storybook, how many of you have read a storybook to kids and they've fallen asleep? They love the story, but what happens? There's something about your voice, there's something about calming, there's something, that's why we read storybooks at night. And if you're telling a story, you're going to have to do something to engage your audience in a way that will not put them to sleep. So my tip number one is that you present to your audience in a very personal way what your whole thing is without reading your paper. That's your own little script. You can memorize it if you're really, really nervous, or you can have notes that you can talk from. But give them an idea. Say, I'm going to give you, Ruth and I are presenting a paper. Rebecca and Ruth are presenting a paper together. So Ruth and I are presenting a paper today that we developed in a class on da-da-da-da. So now they know what the context is. And we were very interested in this because we disagreed with something da-da-da. So you give them a context of why are you writing this? Who cares? Why is this important? And if it's something that's very obtuse, way teeny little bitty tiny thing, like, if you were a scientist, you know that they get very involved in these minuscule projects, then you have to make this interesting to them. Tell them a story. Say, did you know that, da-da-da-da-da-da? Tell them a story about why this would be important to them. And if you cannot figure out a story to tell them about why this might be important to them, you will have this guy. You've got to engage them in that way to make their mind begin to follow what you're trying to do. Okay, so that's the first thing, is to give them a little intro, explain why, ask them some questions. How many of you get a feeling for your audience? And that is tip number 2. You may not want to do that immediately because some people are very shy at first. How many of you have been to a talk in which people said, so tell me a little bit about yourselves. And they go, oh boy, well, I really came here to find out about how we're going to be doing such and such, and now I have to listen to all these people, and once these people get the microphone, who knows how long they're going to tell, So go start out with you. Tell them about you. Tell them about what you're doing and what I just suggested. But the second thing is to try to find out a little bit about your audience, because, for example, if tonight I had not asked you, I would not know that none of you are doing a poster, and my whole talk is on posters, most of it.
Talk on coasters.
I will go back to it, but I want to engage you on this other thing too.
A quick thing about the poster session, there's the Information Ethics Roundtable in the spring, which we're going to have several students do poster sessions, so it will be important next semester.
Good, good. I will
Yeah.
go through it. But I'm taking
Just so
this
people
little
know.
side. I'm glad you did it. But find out about them. Say how many of you are students, how many of you are faculty, how many of you are, get a little feel for your audience. One of the things that I think speakers, the best speakers in the world do, is they're energized by their audience. When they have their audience there, they can be just dead tired and all of a sudden just come to life because their people are so important to them that they get the energy. Those are the best speakers. It's not about just them. It's about what they have to say is going to impact that audience. And they care about it. They actually care. And I can think of a speaker who came to Tucson who was speaking. My husband went to a rally or something, and he said this guy was sitting there and looking really dead tired, probably been all over the country, and then all of a sudden he started speaking, and he just got energized. He said it was just the moment. We're all standing there for half an hour, and we were so energized by the speech. And that's what it should be. It should be kind of following the words. So another tip on being a good reading the paper is to not just be text paper you read. You can read your paper. You must have rehearsed it so that you know where to look up, so you know where to pause and put in a little quip like, you know what I'm talking about here. Or if you don't know what I'm talking about, what I mean is this is like your little aside story. Because that breaks up that pure paper, you and the paper. Have a little story to tell, maybe even just one through your whole paper that says, you know what, as an example of this, just as an aside, as an example. It means that you're human again. Because sometimes we're robotic a little bit when we're reading. So you cannot do that if you have not rehearsed. And I strongly recommend that you rehearse once in front of a mirror. That's really hard to do. Because you see what you look like. And you don't look like you think you look like. It's really funny. All of a sudden, you realize that you're like this. And your mouth is down and your eyes are big and you're very tense. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, you have to laugh. You just can't be serious because it makes you laugh because you see yourself. And so once you break that stress, just being so tight about yourself, you get over it and you are a little more human. We were at a luncheon with the president when he was being introduced. And no, I'm sorry, this was the inaugural, excuse me, they were on stage. And one of the speakers was representing staff. And so there were all the speakers. She got up and she said, I'm so-and-so and I'm 5'11". And she said, when they called to say I was going to be speaking on the stage at the president's inaugural, this is a Shelton University president, she said, I was just panicked about what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to face the audience? Centennial Hall, I never even, she's getting all panicked. She said, I was hyperventilating, my blood pressure was up. And she said, and then all of a sudden, my child said to me, Mom, this isn't about you. This is about the president. You're supposed to just talk about him. I said, how are you getting all this thing? But out of the mouths of babes, How many, was anybody here
We've heard her name.
Anyway, so then she said, so now I'm so-and-so. They had asked her how tall she was so that they could get the gown for her. And then she said, I'm so-and-so, and I'm 5'11", and now I can talk to you about the president. And she did a wonderful job, wonderful. And I think it was because she got it off herself. It's not about you, it's about your information. What do you want them to know? Why is this important to them? What do you want them to do with the information? And if you don't want them to do anything with the information, what do you want them to know that you're going to do with the information? So if you were doing a research project, or if you're, what's your talk about, Rebecca?
It's Native American communities and intellectual property issues.
Excellent. Native American community and intellectual properties issues. You know, they may not know about it, they may not care about it, but by the time they finish, you will want them to know and to care. Just to know more than they did when they sat down, and to care a little bit more. And the caring comes from your stories. The last thing that I can think of right now off the top of my head, I'll come back to it, is be a storyteller. Papers are not just, even the most scientific papers tell a story. And if you can remember that you're telling a story to an audience in your paper, you're filling them in. You lay out at the beginning what your paper is about. And even if it's research, you tell that in the literature review. In the lit review, you're telling who said this, who said that. Why do I think this is right? You know, and this is what I'm building on. And then you tell what your methodology. So now I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And then you tell what happened. And then you conclude it. Why is it important? What are the implications? And what do we need to do in the future? It's the future, and what are the implications? So I'll go back a little bit now to this poster. The engagement that occurs in a poster presentation is phenomenal. Sometimes, how many of you have ever been in a conference paper, a poster presentation? Yeah.
Just at the symposium last year, Elizabeth Austin
had a poster. What was it like? Describe it a little bit.
It was good. It was, she told a story about her working in an archive, and just what she had on the poster just went like a little story. And it was good, but it was, I remember it.
Did she talk and people stand around, or how did it work?
She just talked. She was sitting in the room with her poster.
With her poster. Okay. Well, and I think were there only one or two last year?
She was basically giving a presentation with a poster.
Poster on her back, instead of reading a paper. Okay. Because in this scene that you see right here, this is probably at a conference where there is a poster session. So everybody walks around from poster to poster, and some people just walk by, they look, and they look at the title. If that's interesting, they'll stop. If you're talking, they might listen. They might hear something that they liked of what you were saying and stay, and sometimes they don't stay for the whole thing. This one so struck me because look how engaged that professor, that he obviously looks like he's a professor, and that's a student, and he's really engaged in what that student is saying. I really liked that picture because that's what you want to do. And it looks like he's done some, and guys, pondering what he's saying. You know, this is the whole point of it, is what's new out there? What are people doing? And as I said earlier, the when on the poster, conferences and as an alternative form of teaching and learning, but another very important use of posters, which is not often mentioned, is where there are language barriers. So when you're presenting at a conference, a foreign conference, or if you're going to be in another country where there will be a lot of other maybe non-English speakers, you can present visually, but you can't present in papers. Even when you're talking about it, if people don't quite understand what you're saying, your accent is very good, your English isn't very good, and that you're trying to speak, they can at least see the visual, and you will have done it in the language of the conference, which is probably English, and would be able to do it. The other thing, and I think this is going to be me, the last one, the conferences run out of paper space, rooms where people are presenting. I've submitted a proposal to AERA, which is the American Education Research Association, and it is huge. Thousands of people go. I think they had 1,500 people in San Francisco last year. So I'm hoping mine will get accepted as a poster because they just have so many papers being presented, and I'm a new member, so I've submitted to a new member poster presentation, and I'm hoping that I'll be able. And that's a really wonderful experience for meeting new people. In fact, it's a new member networking vehicle that they allow you to do a poster, and then you're able to network with people. So I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't been told I got accepted, but I'm looking forward to it, and then I will get accepted. So I just put the where, the classes, symposiums, conventions, conferences. Do you all know what a colloquy is? Has anybody ever heard of a colloquy here at the university? Okay, they have one across the street. Pardon?
So I've heard of the term, but I can't quite.
Okay. Well, it's with these other things, so what do you think it is?
Well, gathering. Obviously gathering.
Pardon?
An academic type gathering.
That's exactly it. Okay. It's an academic, and students across the street in the College of Education, language reading and culture students put together a colloquy every year, and it's sort of a potluck. All the students from LRC bring some kind of food. They have food, and then the students have their own presentations. And that was actually what started our symposium. That was the impetus for our starting our symposium. And in the first year, I was the advisor for our symposium because I think it's such a good idea for students to have an opportunity to present the information that they've either written up in their papers or that they want to write up, or something that they've been doing a little research on. And then, of course, the who is people up there. Now, I have a few sites for you to see. These, I think, are, no, you can keep that on. We're going to just go right through these. Some of them I gave you a couple of sheets, but I want you, these are links, and I want you to see what they look like. Nope, that's the last one. You can find these on the internet, so I highly recommend. I don't know if you can see that well, but this is the National Honor Society in Psychology. This would be a very academic, a very academic organization. It's an honor organization, and they have some really, really good tips on paper presentations, which I thought you might enjoy. The short time of only 12 minutes. Okay. Some conferences only give you 10 minutes to present your paper, and that means that you have to present your whole paper in 10 minutes. Now, you know how long it took you to write it. You're not going to be able to present it. If you have a 10-minute presentation of your paper, cut it down. Take your paper and then write a 10-minute speech on it. Because you will do a disservice to your paper in trying to race through it. People will go, whoa.
I've been in time situations where they actually have lights. The
Yeah.
green light changes to yellow and then red, and there are some people I've seen who try to give the entire long version, and then hit the yellow light and only be a third of the way through and try to push everything else into a minute.
You cannot go over the limit, time limit. It's discourteous to other people whose time is allotted for that. And they won't have the time, because the conference, you know how the symposium is, it's boom, 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 you have your papers, and then you go to your next session. So you always want to make sure that you have your own time, and that you have a backup plan. If you run out of time, you've got too many side things, or people ask you questions you didn't expect, then go to something that summarizes it within a minute. Have a little summary statement that you can give in 30 seconds, something like that. Anyway, this particular site also has the poster presentations and things on how you construct the poster, and I think that that would be extremely helpful to you. The one that I gave you on your sheet is this one right here. Yep. That's one of them. You can, you can go to this. This is an effective poster is a visual communication tool. I love that statement. It's a visual communication tool, because really that's what you're doing. It has to be focused, it's graphic, you know, it has the drawings and if you have charts and figures and all of those things, it makes it very readable, and should be easy for them to follow, for your audience to follow. And then here's another one. This is also on your handout. No, this one is not. This one I really liked because it gives you the general format, and it has some components of it. And I really liked it. Isn't that easy to look at? Isn't that easier to look at than even that big one that I showed you? It's very the big one. But I liked this because this format is easy for people to focus on. And of course, you want to make sure that your name and all that stuff is up there. But I thought this was a nice website for you to look at, to see how you would put it together. And then this one is the full, you have on your handout one section of it, which is this section right here. Would somebody read to me this section? Isn't it say, is there a standard format? No, on the white page, white sheets. Is there one that says, is there a standard format? This right here, did you get this?
No.
You didn't get this? No. Oh, sorry. Okay, not on that? Okay, anyway. So this is a website that has all the sections that you need. The preamble, which is your introduction. How much your space. Always your conference will tell you how big a space you're allowed. Your poster cannot be any more than 3 feet by 5 feet, or how much space you have. And then this tells you, is there a standard format? And I really like this one because it said, it gives you exactly the pieces. The title, the summary, the conclusion, the methodology if you're doing research, the key parts, and how you plan it. Okay. How you go about planning your session. What the design should look like. Okay, and then the last one, this is the cheater. This gives you the website for where you would go. Here, right here. I think it's this one. Anyway, one of the, I know where it is. One of the websites is where do you go to. I have to show you this because I thought it was so cool. Yeah, it's this one. Professional prints. That way I can This one is, I thought this was incredible. I had never seen this before. You download your free template. You put it into you insert your content into what looks like a PowerPoint. You send it in. I'm sure there's a pretty hefty fee for this. And they will turn it around to you within 24 hours as a poster that looks like this.
Wow.
So that was
It says
really,
payment option.
yes, a payment option. So it's definitely, I guess we could look at that, but I want to look at it.
You laugh
But
at
anyway,
it, though,
so that should give you some ideas on the go back up again. And good presenters. These are some tips. You know them, but don't go into a presentation without at least number one. Because it's not fair to take other people's time to listen to something that you know that you're going to present. You always know when you're going to present that you've had at least a week's notice. I mean, very few people call you up and say, will you do a presentation tonight at 5 o'clock? So, be professional, show courtesy, all those things. And so, you want to make sure that you don't read your presentation word for word. Makes it very, very difficult. And these are just some pictures of more posters. See how busy that is, though? Could you ever read that? It's just too much information. It's like they took the whole paper and put it on. That would be, to me, a don't. That's a little better, but that's also a lot of text. And some of the physics and papers have to have a lot of that, or they don't get accepted. Yeah.
Well, the previous poster was a little bit busy, although you can make the argument that there are lots of pictures. So even if you were learning in a museum class, people don't take time to read, but you can still go through and look at the pictures and charts, and you can still get.
Actually, that's right.
From.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very good observation. By having put the pictures in there, they've actually given you enough information that you could be attracted to that, and then read the text to find out.
If you wanted to.
If you want, yeah.
I'm so sorry.
And just go through this. That's my final slide. And that's on your paper, so you can go back to it and keep it as a tip. Questions? Yeah, questions.
Anybody?
Yes.
If you have a 15-minute time, how long should you present and how long should you leave for discussion generally?
Usually, it depends a little bit on your content, but this is what I've experienced just from personal experience. When people don't know a lot about your subject, they're not going to be able to ask a lot of questions. They will ask questions about what you presented. Now, if it's a topic like Native American, you might just think of the kinds of questions they might be interested in or what they might know and just say, when we finish, we'd like you to know this, this, and this. Now, if you give them some guidelines on what are you trying to get across? You want them to know how important it is, what the violation of the Indian, Native American tribes is. Do you want them to know what the laws are, the legislation that's pending? Do you want them to know what is currently happening in terms of giving back tribal artifacts or whatever? Who's involved in it? Who's doing it here? You don't want to overwhelm them with too much, like right there, that's 5 questions. It's an awful lot for them if they don't know a thing about it. It's an awful lot for people to know. So to answer your question, if you have 15 minutes, I would say on a topic where you have, you have some things, I'd say give them at least 5 minutes. 50 minutes.
Yeah.
You have a 50-minute presentation? That's a
The
full
symposium.
It gives 50 minutes?
We didn't say enough.
That's a long presentation.
Well, we don't have to take up the full. We don't have to take up the full.
Well, you know what, you're both doing it together. I would definitely split it up and have you talk, and then her talk, and then do a question answer.
Yeah.
And then have you summarize and her summarize, and that,
Because we were
because
also-
it breaks it up. At 50
Yeah.
minutes is a long
We're
presentation.
hoping to have a lot of that be like facilitating a discussion, because we think it's, good topics to have more discussion.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Yeah,
judge
and I will tell you
our
one
audience is
thing.
going to be. So.
One thing that helps in a presentation like that where you want discussion, you set the tone for that at the very beginning. If you start talking, and then you say, okay, now, I want you to talk to your neighbor and ask discuss this with them. They're like, I don't even know my neighbor. But if you start out and say, okay, I would like you to meet the person next to you, take us a minute. You've got time. Say, take a minute and introduce yourself. Oh, I'm sorry, I pulled myself off.
You did.
I'm sorry. And this is the most interesting part. Anyway, say, I'd like you to take a minute and introduce yourself to the person next to you. And that will only take, probably very little time. And then you are forming a community of learners. I believe very, very strongly in developing a community of learners. Anywhere we are, if you're a librarian, every single thing you do, and whether you call it information technology, librarianship, reference librarian, whatever it is, you are teaching. I have, had some people say, we're not teachers, we're librarians. In every instance that you are showing people something or talking to people about something, you're teaching. And so develop the community of learners as you learn best yourselves in a community. Develop it with the people that you're talking with. So I would take a minute and say, introduce yourself. I'm going to have a little exercise in which you're going to be talking to each other, and we won't have time to introduce yourself then, but please do that. You set the tone for what you're going to do. Once you have set that tone, it's a lot easier for people to do that because they're going to mind you. If you said, okay, everybody stand up, they'll stand up. Nobody else stays sitting.
If you told them to swap seats so that they're not sitting next to a good buddy that they know, but that somebody needs.
Yes, they'll do it at the beginning. But try to do that in the middle or the end. This is my chair. I'm staying right here. It's just funny. We're funny about that. People are funny about that. And you don't know those kinds of things about how to present if you haven't had a little experience.
Well,
But go ahead.
say we get there and there's no AV equipment. For whatever reason, it isn't there. So for those who are presenting, and do you just talk? Do you try and write as you talk?
As organizers, you should have a backup plan. You should have Post-it type board, paper and pencil, or even a roll for each room to use to put across the wall or whatever you want to do. That's a manageable thing because that's your backup plan. Choose your backup plan. You can either have poster boards on the paper for them to write on that they can stick up, but you need tape and paper and things like that, scissors and markers, because some people, it's very hard for me to teach just talking. I like the blackboard. I like to be able to go and illustrate something because I'm a visual learner, and so I like to use that. And sometimes maybe I'm not as clear in my speech as I am at drawing something. So have a backup plan because that has happened. that the AV equipment, the mic went off, the laptop died, who knows what. But if you have a backup plan, then you just say backup plan, and everybody is used to that. It's not a problem for the audience. It's only a problem for the audience when they see that you're totally unprepared. So I think that you can handle that. But 50 minutes is a long time. Like at AERA or at Elise, I think your presentation max is 15 minutes. And you're supposed to give 5 minutes for question and answer.
Not everybody has to talk for 15 minutes.
Does everybody, they don't all have 50 minutes?
No, everybody's allotted 50 minutes.
I mean, we could even do it where it's not set in stone yet. We have 3 or 4 presentations during the 50 minutes in different rooms. So if 2 people wanted to split the time,
Yeah.
we could do that. I mean,
Yeah.
we have to send emails out there.
Yeah.
That's what we can do.
Yeah, because I remember when we were planning the first one, there was a great deal of discussion about how to move people around and what to do. The other thing I was going to mention to you is, because I'm a big believer in community of learners, rather than ask questions, have them ask questions. You may have some Native American people who obviously that are interested in coming, or they wouldn't have, they're interested in your topic. Find out if there's any expertise already in the audience and let them share their story. Because the more, as you find out who your audience is, you find out that the tribal leader of such and such who used to run a museum is right there. Capture that expertise because you learn from them. And I think that we spend a lot of time thinking we know this stuff without knowing who we're talking to, and they want to know what you have to say. So they are interested in knowing new things or whatever. But you can also be, the community of learners is there to teach you too. There's a great deal that can be learned from the people who are in their audience. What's your presentation going to be on?
I'm not done.
Oh, you're not? Next year. You will. Yes. No, you will. And I think it's really, like, find a partner. Because a partner collaborating on a project like this, it's so much more fun. Oh, it's so much more fun to do it with somebody. Because then you sort of have timelines, and then you have somebody to bounce your ideas off of, and it's not as scary.
You have a ready-made audience, so you don't have to stand in front of the mirror, maybe.
Yeah. You still should stand in front of the mirror. No, it's really hard to stand in front of the mirror. Yes. To talk. Yeah, it's harder as you get older. To talk because you see yourself. And it's people. I didn't know I did that.
Well, it's hard to hear yourself out.
Yeah.
To listen to
Doing it out loud several times.
Well, no, but like, have you ever taped and your
then-
voice doesn't sound
and then-
because you hear your voice
They have at the main science libraries now, they have presentation rooms where you can film yourself and then watch it. And people have been using them, so. The only thing is, there's windows right there, so it's kind of weird to be standing and present.
But it's good training.
It is nice. And then it's almost like a better audience, so it's
If you get distracted by people walking by, what are you going to do with the presentation?
Right.
Someone takes out Kleenex, starts blowing the nose, or throw it paper, clippings, or whatever.
When they start clipping their nails, they just say something. So for the folks, if we were doing 10 minutes, do you even try to go in depth, or do you just try to present your question, your going about it, and your results kind of thing, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually 10 minutes is a long time. That's why when I hear 50 minutes, that's a very long time. Well, for one person, it would be a very long time. It depends. It depends on your topic. I think you have a fascinating topic, and I think that you should have visuals. You definitely have some visuals and a handout. So you use the teaching techniques like engage the audience, have a handout, talk about some key things, you know, get them thinking about some things, ask questions, and then, you know. I had one other thing I was, oh yeah, I know I was going to tell you. When you said that you were thinking in the 50 minutes of even having them, you know, engaging an audience, a very neat technique is when, I don't know how many people you would have, but you could still do this even if people were two, to give each group, 2 or 3 groups, even if you have 2 in a group, a question, and say, or a scenario, and say, okay, this is the scenario, and just hand them the card, you have that in advance, say, I'd like you to read that to each other and come up with a solution, what you would do as a museum, as a tribal leader, as a whatever. So 1 scenario and 3 different perspectives, or 3 scenarios and 1 perspective. So, you know, think about that, because that is a very, very engaging, something engaging to do with your audience when you have that kind of time. It's actually a luxury to have that kind of time. You were going to say something?
Well, I was actually going to ask, granted with presentations you're trying to appear professional, but if you have a big block of time like 50 minutes, what would be wrong with structuring a presentation more like a classroom lesson and engaging the audience that way? Making it like a 50-minute, not a 50-minute presentation, but thinking of it more as, okay, this is my class, I have 50 minutes to go in and talk about this, or am I going to teaching rather than presenting?
It's a good idea. But when you say that, give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, as soon as I heard 50 minutes, I
Thought
with
class.
my teaching, my limited teaching experience, I was thinking, oh, okay, we have a class, so we're going to have more level more to introduce. Okay, let's interact right now. Okay, we're talking about sacred artifacts. Well, I'm sitting in the audience. What are sacred artifacts? So, like the JET program taught me, you bring in reality. Okay, what is this? Is this sacred? Why is it sacred? You get people talking, and then you move on to, okay, these are sacred items, now here's the problem. So structure like that. So that way people are engaged, people are happier, and in 50 minutes you come out of it, you feeling like you accomplished something rather than just listen.
Yeah, exactly. And just before you came in, I was actually talking to Rebecca and Ruth about a way of teaching. When you said that, that's why I said some people think teaching is talking to them.
Okay.
That you open up their brain and pour in information. And if that's the kind of teacher you are, that would be just as bad as, you know, reading a paper for But the kind of teaching that you're obviously a different kind of teacher than some.
I'm not even a qualified teacher.
But you've had some teaching experience,
Yeah.
so you know about a warm-up and a engaging time and questions and visual aids, regalia. And so that is a very, the philosophy behind that way of teaching is that we learn through interaction, through social interaction. And it allows you, that's why at the very beginning, you're giving permission to that audience to be a talker and a communicator with you. And you set the tone in the very first few minutes that you are talking. So they know right away the kind of teacher you are and what you're going to be, you know, because we're now using that teaching technique much, much more. So people aren't so, oh gosh, and now I've got to participate. You know?
That's what I mean. When you cross the boundary from sitting and listening to participating, people are more reluctant. But if you interact with your audience in the first 2 minutes, if you have 5 people in a room, okay, you meet person 1, what's your name? I'll really ask them a little bit. Then throughout the 50 minutes, eventually you meet all 5 people.
Yeah.
And so getting people in right away.
The other thing that I think that we do at these presentations that's an inhibitor of participation is the format of the way your classroom is set up, or that room is set up. I always go into a presentation, if I'm going to be doing some interaction stuff, I move the chairs around. So I move them in groups of 2. So I make them, like in here when I'm teaching, I move the classroom the way I want it. And I remember this summer I had to do a teaching strategy for Knowledge River. And so I brought that podium out from behind, and I put it in the class, and I had these rows. And so I just went up with my paper, and then I said hi, and told them who I was, and then I said, okay, stop. And they were Knowledge River students who were going to be working with high school students in this health thing. And I said, okay, now, what was your first reaction when you walked into this room, when you sat down? They said, we had a class, and you were going to lecture to us. And I said, that's what your kids are going to think if you do that to them. And I said, what's the difference between that? And then I sat down at the table like this, and we all came around the table, and it's a different feeling. And it's a different permission level. This one is we're all equal. You can talk, you can talk, you can talk to her, you can talk to each other. But the stand at the podium is a barrier. It's a barrier to communication. It means I'm here to listen.
That's what's nice about the poster sections too, is that people go right up to the poster, there's no barrier, and you're standing next to them.
Right, yeah.
That's a related question. It's a little bit off topic, but for a person who's giving a presentation for a professional job interview, do any of these tips apply? For example, engaging your audience. I imagine when you're going in, your audience, they all know each other, and so you're coming in as the outsider, so perhaps not asking them to introduce themselves to each other. I don't know.
No, but I think that when you go in, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, just the idea that we know each other and introduce.
Yeah. No, I think that there are 2 ways to think about that presentation. One is they want to see what you can do. And 2 is you want to impress them with what you know so that you are sharing information. But they want to see what you do. Even if it were totally different than what they expected, if you're good at it, and you've practiced, even if you say, okay, I don't know you, I know you know each other, but I'm going to come in here assuming that I'm working with a group of people who don't know each other. So you have to, play along with me, that this is the way I will teach. Just tell them. And say, and then go through your little thing. If there's a time when they're introducing themselves, they'll giggle and they'll go, hi, also, so and so, but they'll probably go along with you and giggle and some laughing, but that breaks the ice. And it does make it a lot easier for you to be in a more relaxed atmosphere. You don't want to be, you want to really show them the best of you. The best of you is when you're relaxed. The worst of you is when you're tense, nervous, your throat is dry, your mouth is your lips are cracked, you're sweating, your heart is, first of all, it constricts the blood, so you don't get oxygen to the brain. So you can't think as well. So the more relaxed you are, we have a medical doctor, is that true or not?
Sounds good.
I think you want to have as much oxygen. Deep breaths.
Thinking of bringing my own tank with me.
Not yet. Sorry. But as soon as you break the ice in your interviews, where there's a little laughter or a little, whatever happens, even if it's a goof, and you can, they're seeing another side of you, it all smooths out after that. And very few people can go into an interview without being a little, hyper, and so deep breaths help, taking a sip of water, or, there are all kinds of little things like that.
You don't want to get too relaxed. I think they want to know that you're on your game. That you're aware that this is important. That, at the same time, like, well, whatever. I'm talking to you, whatever.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
about to go forward in a job process, and they're like, we want a 5-minute presentation on something. And I'm like, 5 minutes? What do you talk about in 5 minutes besides yourself, your name, and then you're done, you know? But I guess 30-minute presentation.
How long?
30 minutes with 15 minutes afterwards for questions.
So 45. That's
You may not.
I'm gonna be in your audience.
But you know what they do for teachers is they actually make them teach a class.